The chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with sound. Laughter, cheers, and the ringing voices of alien rulers shook the tall pillars of the hall. The great dome above glittered with banners from 100 worlds. It was supposed to be a day of hysteria, day when the galaxy celebrated the end of humanity. The speakers repeated it again and again. The humans are finished. Their silence proves it. Long tables stretched across the hall, covered with drinks and jewels. Tall reptilian commanders raised their scaled hands in mock toasts. Insectoid envoys clattered their mandibles like drums of victory. The air smelled of arrogance, victory, and a kind of relief for centuries. Humanity had been a rumor, a problem that never fully disappeared. Now they were gone, or so the council believed. At the far end of the chamber, younger aliens shouted jokes. Primitive. World, primitive species, another added. They burned themselves out with their own fire. Fitting end. But not everyone laughed. Near the high platform sat older warlords, scarred veterans with memories burned deep into their bones. They did not join the cheers. They looked at each other in silence, and their eyes were heavy. They remembered battles that had ended badly. They remembered a kind of fury that only humans carried, a fury that had burned entire fleets. Among them sat a young envoy named Lyratel, from a minor world forgotten by most. She was no soldier, no commander. She was an observer, quiet, curious, often ignored, but her 4 silver eyes watched everything. And she noticed something no one else did, the unease in the veteran's silence. She leaned toward one of them, an old general whose scales were dulled with age. "Why do you not laugh?" she asked softly. The old general turned his head slowly. His voice was like stone cracking, because laughter is dangerous when it is too loud. "It blinds us." Before she could reply, the great hall shuddered not from within, but from the distant hum of the galaxy's sensor grid. Across the chamber, holographic displays lit up, uninvited. An ancient network of deep space scanners had triggered an alert. The laughter faltered. A low voice spoke from the machines. "Anomaly detected. Sector Orion Rift. Source unknown." The words dropped into the hall like cold iron. For a moment, silence. Then the leaders laughed again, louder than before. Trying to cover the chill in their spines? An anomaly? "It is nothing," one shouted. "A dying star, perhaps," said another. "Or a glitch." The humans left no machines behind. They have no power left. But the machines spoke again. Movement detected. Energy distortion expanding. Object approaching. Air turned heavy. Lyratel's heart quickened. She whispered, almost to herself, "It is too fast. Too quiet." The old general nodded without speaking. His claws tapped the table in slow rhythm, as if remembering a sound he had heard before the thunder of human engines. The council tried to laugh it off again. They raised their cups. They shouted at the machines, but the distortion did not vanish. Instead, the readings grew sharper. The object was real. It was coming closer. One by one, the alien leaders stopped laughing. Across the galaxy, fleets reported the same thing. Battles between empires halted. Ships froze in mid-fire. On every tactical screen, a shadow flickered in the void. Too large to be a fighter, too silent to be a trade ship. The council chamber filled with whispers now, not laughter. Old stories returned, the kind told to frighten children, the kind buried by historians who wanted to erase the past. Stories of one human warship moving alone, cutting through fleets like a blade through paper. An insectoid admiral slammed his claws against the table. "This cannot be. Humanity is extinct."
Ow.
But the machines did not lie. The distortion was. Growing at speed was impossible. Silence unnatural. Lyratel stood, her voice trembling but clear. "What if they are not gone? What if the humans were waiting?" The chamber froze at her words. 100 eyes turned to her. Some glared, some mocked. But just a few looked at her with the same fear that pressed against her own chest. On the display, the anomaly began to take shape. No longer just numbers, no longer just static. A shadow appeared, long, sharp, deliberate. The voice of the machines broke the silence one last time. Unknown vessel entering war zone. Classification: unregistered. Signature: incomplete. Now confirmed. The laughter was gone. In the heart of the Galactic Council, where power once echoed with arrogance, the air now held only silence. Silence and the weight of something old, something human, moving in the dark void. Lyratel looked at the old general. His eyes were locked on the shadow, and his voice was barely more than a whisper. They said humanity had fallen, but I remember the truth. One ship was always enough. The council chamber trembled, and across the galaxy, fleets held their breath. The shadow and the void was coming. The galaxy's battlefields had always been loud. Fleets roared, weapons flared, and empires screamed across the stars. But now, all of that fell into silence. Everywhere the same anomaly appeared. Warships in the Orion Rift stopped firing. Entire formations froze in mid-combat as their scanners displayed the same message. Distortion detected. On a dozen different bridges, alien captains leaned forward, their mandibles, horns, or scaled faces lit by the pale glow of trembling sensors. "It's nothing," one said, trying to steady his voice. "Phantom energy," another muttered, though his hand shook. But none of them believed their own words. The readings were too sharp, too steady, too real, in the Galactic Council chamber. The arguments had begun. Leaders shouted over each other, their voices turning from laughter to anger. "It's a trick. It's a natural event." "No, it's a vessel." The great hall shook as the distortion intensified. Holographic maps expanded, showing its path. The object was not wandering, it was not random. It was moving with intent, straight into the war zone. The older generals who had stayed silent during the celebration leaned forward now. Their eyes were hard. They had seen this before, long ago, in battles that history had tried to erase. Lyratel, the young envoy, stood near the back of the chamber. She could feel her own breath quickening. The displays filled with numbers, velocity, mass, output. Each one was impossible. Ships tried to scan it directly, but their instruments failed. The distortion swallowed signals whole. Every attempt to read its shape returned static. But the static was consistent. It had a rhythm, like a heartbeat. On the far side of the Orion Rift, fleets of insectoid warriors prepared to advance. Commanders believed they were about to claim victory. But when the distortion crossed their sensors, even the most fearless of them froze. "Report," barked a commander. His technicians stared at their consoles. We cannot lock on, sir. It bends the signal back at us. Our scans, they are blind." The commander's mandibles clicked in panic. Blind. Nothing blinds us. But the truth was clear. Something in the void was erasing their eyes, turning their most powerful technology into useless noise. Back in the council chamber, the debate turned to fear. "Launch fleets," one leader demanded. "Fall back," cried another. "No," said the old general with the cracked voice. His eyes never left the shadow on the display. "If you move too soon, it will notice you." The words cut through the noise like a blade. The chamber fell quiet. Everyone understood. Whatever it was, this distortion was not blind. It was watching. Them Lyratel's silver eyes widened. She whispered, "It is deliberate. It is hunting." The distortion began to grow sharper, no longer a blur, but a narrowing shape. The void itself seemed to fold around it, bending like fabric stretched too tight. Across the galaxy, commanders gave the same order. "Hold position. Do not fire." Yet no one felt safe. In one fleet, a nervous alien officer disobeyed. His ship launched a probe toward the anomaly. The probe disappeared instantly. Not destroyed, simply gone. The signal was cut in half, as if the void had swallowed it whole. Gasps filled the council chamber when the footage arrived. The distortion had consumed the probe without a sound, without a flash. The old general whispered, "That is no accident. That is control." Whispers spread like fire. Could it be human? The younger leaders laughed again, but this time it was hollow. The sound cracked in their throats, because deep inside, they remembered the rumors.
Oh.
That even when human colonies burned, their warships fought on. That a single Terran ship had once erased an entire fleet before vanishing into silence. The distortion grew, each second heavier, closer, more deliberate. On the battlefield, alien fleets drifted like frozen statues. Weapons armed, but unfired. Engines hot, but unmoving. The entire Orion Rift had turned into an audience, waiting for a shadow to step onto the stage. In the council hall, the laughter was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was silence, broken only by the voice of the machines repeating the same words over and over. Unknown object. Signature incomplete. Shadow approaching. The great powers of the galaxy had believed humanity was finished. Now something moved in the dark. And every leader, every soldier, every world felt the same thing. Fear. Because whatever it was not drifting by chance. It was coming for them. The void was not empty anymore. For hours. The distortion had grown across the Orion Rift, spreading like a wound in space. Fleets from 100 worlds watched in silence, their weapons armed but unused. No one dared fire. No one dared move. Then, without warning, the void itself trembled. A shimmer rippled across the stars, bending light like waves across water. Commanders shouted orders, but their voices shook. Engineers tried to steady scanners, but every reading collapsed into static. And then they saw it at first. It was only a shape like a shadow painted against the black of space. Long, sharp, deliberate, bigger than any vessel near it. Its surface seemed to drink light instead of reflecting it, as if it was made from the void itself. The alien crews stared in silence. This was not the gleaming silver of their own fleets. It was darker, heavier, something forged for war alone. On one bridge, a commander whispered, "It is not ours." Another replied, "Then whose is it?" No answer came. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Leaders shouted at their aides, demanded answers, screamed at the scanners for clarity. It must be a weapon of the Drylith. No, it is a new class from the Vaner. Possible. No empire has this power. But the old general only shook his head slowly. His voice was like stone grinding. No, none of them would build such a thing. It's only one species would. The young envoy Larital turned toward him, her silver eyes wide. "You mean humans?" The chamber fell silent. The laughter of earlier felt like a distant memory now, something foolish and dangerous. Every leader could feel it. The shadow was not random, not alien, not unknown. It was familiar in the worst way. On the battlefield, one insectoid admiral lost control. His fear turned to rage. Fire upon it before it strikes first. Zons of ships obeyed, launching beams of plasma and volleys of torpedoes toward the shadow. The void lit up with blinding color, but as the weapons touched the distortion, they vanished. The missiles disappeared like raindrops falling into an endless ocean. The beams of light curved, bent, and faded into nothing. The crews gasped in terror. It absorbed them. It ate our fire. Nothing can do that. The shadow did not move. It only grew clearer. What had been a shimmer now sharpened into structure. Angled hull plating. Towering spires. A front line of cannons carved like scars across its surface. Every ship in the sector could now see it, the warship, and yet something about its silence was worse than its power. It had not fired. It had not spoken. It only watched. On the council floor, Liratel whispered, "It is waiting." The old general nodded grimly. They always wait. Humans strike only when the moment is perfect, when their enemy has already lost. The warship shifted once so slowly that it felt like the stars themselves moved.
Oh.
Its engines glowed with a faint blue light, sharp as ice, quiet as death. For many who watched, it was their first time seeing such a thing. For the older ones, it was a memory they wished had stayed buried, because this was not just any vessel. It was a Terran warship, and if one had returned, it meant the stories were true. Humanity had never surrendered. They had only gone silent, hiding in the dark, waiting for the day when their silence would end. the council chamber filled with fear. No one laughed now. The insectoid admiral who had ordered the attack screamed into his cums, "Fall back! Fall back!" But it was too late. The shadow in the void had fully stepped into the light. Its size dwarfed every alien dreadnought around it. Its hull was scarred, ancient, yet alive. Weapons glowed like suns waiting to ignite. And etched along its side, in letters older than the council itself, was a single word. Not every alien could read it, but those who could felt their hearts collapse with fear. The first human warship had returned, and the galaxy understood. One truth in that instant: this was not the end of humanity. This was the beginning of their revenge. The battlefield around the Orion Rift was silent, but the silence was not peace. It was the silence of predators realizing something larger had entered their hunting ground. Thousands of ships floated motionless. In the void, their weapons primed but unused, their crews whispering in fear. The shadow in the distance had finished forming. It was no mirage. It was no glitch. It was a ship enormous, ancient, terrifying. The alien admirals stared as its hull reflected almost no light. It was a vessel designed not to be seen, yet its silhouette devoured the stars behind it. The alien probe that had approached moments ago was gone, erased as if it had never existed. The silence stretched heavier than the gravity of a collapsing star. Every second felt like an hour. Every alien officer held their breath, and then, without warning, the shadow spoke. A human voice. Raw and heavy with steel, echoed through every ship and every council chamber. It was not transmitted by radio, not carried on standard bands. It came through everything: comms, speakers, even the implants behind alien ears. It was as if the void itself had found a tongue. "This sector is under human protection. Leave now or be destroyed." The words froze blood. They were calm, not shouted. No threats, no growls. Just simple, cold truth. For centuries, the galaxy had told itself that Earth was dead, that the species who fought without fear had burned away in their own wars, that they were a ghost, a myth, a warning. But now, that myth had spoken in their heads. It was alive. Panic spreads. On the council floor, the younger leaders begin shouting at one another. Some call for immediate retaliation. Others demand proof before acting. The older generals stay silent, their eyes locked on the ship's projection. One scarred elder rises, his voice trembling. I have heard that voice before. "I fought at Cygni Prime. I watched as a single Terran frigate tore through our lines. We thought it was destroyed. But here it is again. The room erupts. Some aliens accuse the humans of trickery. Others whisper that this is a ghost ship, a cursed vessel returned from death. On the battlefield, the insectoid fleet recovers from shock. Their commander, filled with rage, refuses to retreat. He orders another full barrage. Thousands of plasma bolts and missiles flood the void toward the human warship. The ship does not move. Instead, its hull glows with lines of blue fire. Low hum fills the vacuum, vibrating the very frames of the alien vessels. Then, in a burst of light sharper than a star's birth, the warship speaks again, not in words, but in action. Every missile, every beam, every torpedo freezes mid-space. For a heartbeat, the weapons hang, suspended, their engines screaming but unmoving. Then, with a single pulse of light from the ship's hull, the entire storm of alien fire turns around. The weapons twist back. They do not vanish this time. They fly faster, sharper back into the fleets that fired them. Explosions blossom across the alien armadas like a field of burning flowers. Ships are ripped apart by their own weapons. Thousands of lives vanish in a single breath. On the council floor, silence reigns. Dozens of alien leaders, once laughing, now stare in pale horror at the screens. The young envoy Lyratel feels her heart's pound against her chest. She watches the massive ship hover in the void, unmoved by the carnage it has unleashed. "What? What do they want?" one leader whispers. The human voice answers as if it heard. "We warned you once. You ignored us. We warned you again. You laughed. Now hear us one final time. Leave this war, or share their fate." The words carried no anger, no pride, only finality. The shadowed ship shifted slightly, its massive cannons glowing brighter, lighting the void in eerie blue. Alien fleets scrambled for answers, but no one dared to fire again. Somewhere in the council chamber, Envoy asked the question every mind now whispered, but none dared to say aloud. What are they? The silence that followed was louder than the laughter had ever been. The Orion Rift was on fire. Silence had been shattered by the alien fleet's own weapons bent, backward by unseen hands and hurled into their own ranks. Ships burned like paper lanterns in the dark. Vast war cruisers that had ruled systems. 4 centuries cracked apart in a heartbeat. The stars themselves seemed to vanish behind the shadow that now floated silently, watching, waiting. No one knew its name yet. No one dared to speak the word they feared. On the bridge of the Zorath dreadnought Krassith, Admiral Varric roared, his mandibles clashing so hard they sparked. His crew worked frantically at the consoles, trying to relock onto the black vessel. Nothing. Every sensor beam vanished as soon as it touched the warship's hull. It absorbs everything. One technician cried, mandibles clacking with terror. That's impossible, Varric hissed. No ship can do that. But even as he spoke, a blue glow began to spread across the shadow. Lines of light traced its armor like rivers of fire. Waking from a million years of sleep, the comms cracked again with that same calm human voice. Final warning, stand down. For the first time in centuries, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy hesitated. The insectoid fleet ignored the warning. Pride burned hotter than fear. Hundreds of their warships moved in formation, weapons primed. Plasma torpedoes lit the void like a swarm of suns. Lyratel watched from the council chamber's balcony as the screens filled with fire. Her heart raced. The old general beside her closed his eyes, whispering in a language only a few remembered. The missiles reached the human ship, and then the void exploded. The weapons did not strike. They were swallowed. The blue glow of the warship's hull surged. Brighter, brighter until it shone like a newborn star. In an instant, the light pulsed outward. Every alien ship that had fired was ripped apart by its own energy. Hulls split open. Engines melted into slag. Whole crews vanished in white fire. The rift became a graveyard. Gasps echoed in the council chamber. The laughter of victory was gone. In its place was terror. Even the proudest voices fell silent. One of the younger leaders, a scaled warrior with golden eyes, broke the silence. This is not possible. They were primitive. They had no shields, no subspace cannons. How the old general's voice cracked like gravel. You never fought them. I did. I watched them bleed, and still they came. I watched them burn, and still they fought. You never saw the black ships rise from Sol's orbit, vanishing into the void. We thought we had destroyed them. We prayed we had, but we were wrong. The shadowed warship moved again. Slowly, almost lazily, its massive frame turned, the blue glow tracing across its surface like veins of fire. It felt alive, ancient, and patient. On the battlefield, the surviving fleets backed away. Some ships tried to flee into warp. Engines screamed. Space twisted. But then came a sound across every channel, every frequency, every translator. You came to our home. You burned our skies. You voted for our death. Do you remember? The voice was human, calm, cold, heavy with memory. Alien crews clutched, their chests as if the words were knives. The younger admirals shook their heads, denying it. We destroyed them long ago, one shouted. Then what is that? Another demanded, pointing at the screen where the warship drifted forward like a rising storm. The vessel's cannons rotated, locking onto the next fleet. 1,000,000 tons of alien steel turned slowly, like prey caught in the gaze of a predator. Panic erupted. Entire squadrons turned and fired wildly, desperate to break the silence. The warship didn't dodge. It didn't need to. Every beam curved around it. Every missile lost power and drifted uselessly into the dark. Then, another pulse of that cold blue light, the warship answered. A single beam shot outward, thin as a needle, bright as a sun. It cut through 3 ships in one breath. No explosion, no fire. Just silence and drifting wreckage. The galaxy had never seen weapons like this. On the council floor, the young envoy, Lyratel, whispered, "It is only one ship." And yet, the old general finished her words, "And yet it makes empires tremble." Every leader in the chamber now knew the truth. Humanity had not vanished. They had hidden their strength, waiting in the shadows of the void. And now, with one ship, they were tearing apart the most powerful fleets in existence. The voice returned once more, deeper, heavier, filling every mind. "This is Erebus. You were warned. Leave now." A silence heavier than war spread across. The Star's ships powered down their weapons. Admirals barked retreat orders. The mighty empires, who had laughed at humanity's weakness, were now backing away in fear. But Lyratel felt something more. She stared at the glowing Titan on the display and realized the voice had not promised peace. It had promised vengeance. And vengeance was patient. The warship had emerged from the void, but no one knew if it would ever leave. And in the silence that followed, one question echoed through every council chamber, every warship, every colony world: what comes next? The shadow in the void had already destroyed a fleet without moving an inch. Alien ships that once crushed planets were gone in a single breath, turned to drifting wreckage by their own weapons. Now, the massive black vessel hovered in silence. Its blue veins glowed faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. On every bridge and in every council chamber, silence spread. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The alien leaders who had laughed at humanity just hours ago now sat frozen, their eyes fixed on the name slowly revealing itself on the side of the ship. It was carved into the armored plates, scarred yet shining through the black metal. The letters were strange to many species, but to a few, they were unforgettable. A word written in the old human tongue, Erebus. The name echoed across the council chamber. Some read it aloud. Others whispered it like a curse. Delegate asked the question that burned on everyone's tongue. "What is Erebus?" The old general stood, his scarred face pale under the dome's lights. His voice shook, though not from weakness, but from memory. "You fools," he said, "that is no ordinary ship. That is their ship, a Terran warship. The last we thought destroyed. But it survived. It has come back." The council chamber erupted into chaos again. Some leaders shouted that the general was lying, that humans were dead, that this was just some ghost or illusion. Others pressed their aides to search the ancient archives, desperate for forgotten records. Lyratel watched, her 4 silver eyes wide. She had never seen the council so broken. The mighty voices that commanded fleets and crushed worlds were now afraid, their words stumbling and desperate. The old general raised his hand. "Quiet," he thundered. The chamber fell still. "You have forgotten what I remember. You erased the records. You called them primitives, but I fought them. I saw one of their ships, that ship tear through an armada larger than this. We thought they burned with their world, but look." On the central screen, the Erebus moved at last. It turned its massive hull slowly, like a predator choosing its next prey. Its cannons pulsed with light. The survivors of the insectoid fleet scrambled to retreat, warping away in desperation, leaving behind thousands of wrecks. The human voice returned, calm, cold, echoing in every mind. "You silenced us. You buried us. You thought we were gone. But we remember everything." The council chamber grew colder. Some leaders lowered their eyes. Others clenched their claws and fists in anger, refusing to show fear. The young envoy whispered, "What do they want?" The old general looked at her. His eyes were heavy, his voice low. "They want you to remember. They want you to know that the war is not over." Across the battlefield, more fleets arrive, drawn by the reports of a new weapon. The Drylith, proud warriors of flame and steel, emerged in massive war barges. The Vaynor sent their crystal cruisers. The Cathari unfolded their living ships, great beasts of bone and sinew that swam through the stars. They had come expecting weakness. They had come to crush a rival already defeated. Instead, They saw the shadow of the Erebus. The new fleets tried to form alliances in panic. Messages flew across the void. If we strike together, we can destroy it. We must overwhelm it with numbers. No, we must retreat. But none of their words mattered. The Erebus did not wait. Its voice came again. This is your last warning. Leave or burn. The warlords hesitated. Pride warred with fear. Empires that had mocked humanity for centuries now faced the ghost of their own crimes. To retreat meant humiliation. To fight meant death. On one bridge, a drylift commander snarled. His burning mane lit the deck as he roared. We are the fire that devours stars. We will not run from a shadow. He raised his hand. His fleet of war barges opened fire. Lyratel gasped as the screens lit up again with a storm of plasma and energy beams. The attacks rushed toward the Erebus like a tidal wave. And then again it happened. The warship did not dodge. It did not flinch. Its hull glowed brighter, the blue veins flaring like lightning under glass. Every enemy weapon slowed, then stopped. Missiles froze mid-space, their trails suspended. Plasma bolts bent, curving like rivers of molten light. And then, like before they turned, the alien fleets barely had time to scream. Their own fire slammed back into them, tearing through shields, shredding armor, splitting ships in half. The drylift barges went up in flames, their roars silenced by the vacuum. In the council chamber, one leader collapsed to the ground, trembling. Another covered her face with her wings, unable to look. The laughter of victory was gone. The galaxies. Most powerful rulers were staring at their own defeat. Loretto gripped the railing, her voice soft but clear. They are not just surviving, they are teaching us fear. The old general looked at her, his eyes glistened with memories. They warned us once, long ago. We thought their silence meant death. We thought we were safe. We turned back to the screen where the Erebus drifted like a nightmare. But silence was their weapon. And now it has ended. The ship pulsed again, its voice echoing across the void. We are humanity. We are not finished. The council chamber shook with the weight of those words. Every empire, every fleet, every soldier now knew the truth. The ghost in the void had a name, and that name was Erebus. The laughter of the galaxy was gone forever. And yet, as the warship's cannons hummed with power, a deeper fear spread through every mind. If this was only one ship, how many more? The Orion Rift was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard, where thousands of ships once fought only burning. Wrecks and drifting bodies remained. Silence was unbearable. The alien fleets that survived hid in the shadows of shattered moons, afraid to even light their engines. At the center of it all floated the black giant, Erebus. Its hull was cracked, scarred, yet unbroken. The blue veins of light still pulsed across its surface, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of some ancient predator. It did not chase. It did not fire. It simply waited. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, the laughter of victory was gone. The same leaders who had once mocked humanity now whispered in panic. Their voices trembled, their hands shook, their eyes fixed on the image of the monstrous ship. They said Earth was dead, muttered one scaled diplomat. They said, the humans burned themselves to ash. Feathered matriarch hissed in reply. And what do you call that? Look at it. It carries scars older than our empires. And yet it still fights. The old general, the one with the cracked voice, rose again. He slammed his claw against the table. You were warned, he said. You thought them weak. You thought silence meant surrender. You erased their history, but I remember, fought them. I saw men of Earth fight until their ships were fire and their bones were ash. I saw them laugh while burning. You do not understand what you face. The chamber fell into stillness again. Fear spread like a sickness. And then the reports arrived from the war zone. Surviving captains sent desperate transmissions. Entire. Fleets begged for orders, demanded to know if they should retreat, if they should fight, if they should kneel. The council could not answer. They argued, shouted, accused. Old grudges rose again. The Drylith blamed the Vaynor for firing first. The Vaynor hissed that the insectoids had already disgraced them all. The amphibious Zell claimed the council had been warned and ignored it. The chamber turned into a storm of blame. In the middle of the chaos, Lyratel whispered to herself, "The galaxy is cracking." She wasn't wrong. Across the stars, alliances began to break. Some empires pulled their fleets home unwilling, to risk the wrath of the warship. Others pushed forward, desperate to claim whatever prize lay in the rift before it was gone. Trade routes collapsed as convoys refused to travel through human-haunted space. Fear itself was spreading faster than any fleet. On a border world, merchants watched as warships left orbit, abandoning colonies to defend their own capitals. Panic spread among the people. They remembered the voice, the warning, "Leave now, or burn." On a Cathari world, citizens filled the streets, demanding to know why their leaders had lied. They had been told humans were weak, broken, forgotten. But the shadow in the rift proved otherwise. In hidden places, old veterans whispered stories they had been forbidden to tell. Stories of humans who fought like storms, who turned battles with nothing but will. Stories of the warship Erebus, the ship that should not exist but somehow does. Back in the council chamber, one of the younger leaders pounded the table with his clawed hand. "We must unite. All of us, Drylith, Vaynor, Zell, every empire, must crush this shadow before it destroys us all." Another leader hissed, "And if it is only one ship, what if more follow? What if 1,000 more wait in the dark? Will you fight them too, or will you beg?" The chamber erupted again. Voices rose, alliances cracked, and the great council that once ruled the galaxy with laughter now trembled with fear. Lyratel stood, her silver eyes watching them all. "You speak of crushing it," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But you do not even understand it, do you not see? It is not even tried yet. It is watching, it is waiting. If this is only one ship—" She paused, her heart's hammering. "And what if there are more?" The words hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Leaders froze, their arguments dying in their throats. The thought was unbearable. One ship had destroyed fleets in seconds. One ship had bent their weapons back against them. There were more hundreds. Thousands, then the galaxy itself could be burned to silence. On the battlefield, the Erebus drifted forward. Its cannons glowed faintly, but it did not fire. Instead, it broadcast once more, the human voice colder than before. "The Council voted for war. The Council voted for our death. The Council will answer." Every leader in the chamber felt the words echo in their bones. It was not a threat, it was a sentence. Some demanded surrender. Others demanded war. Some called for negotiation. But none knew how to speak to a ghost. And still, the ship moved forward. The galaxy, once united in laughter, was now breaking apart in fear. Empires that had stood together for centuries were turning on each other. Some wanted to hide, some wanted to fight, some wanted to beg, but no one, not even the oldest general, could answer the one question now thundering across the stars. How? Many more? The council world was a jewel in the dark rings of light around an ocean of clouds and silver continents, yet tonight it felt small. Its defense towers glowed like needles across the night side. Shield lattice hummed. A planetary. Guard raised a wall of ships in low orbit, engines hot, weapons armed. Every city watched the sky. They watched because a shape had entered the system without a flare, without a jump mark, without a trace. One heartbeat, the space was empty. The next, the shadow was there vast, cold, silent, drifting above the capital like an eclipse pulled too close. Traffic lanes froze. Ferries stopped mid-arc. Patrol craft backed away as if pushed by an invisible hand. The ship's blue veins pulsed slowly, and with each pulse, power grids across the planet flickered. Nothing failed. Everything simply listened, like the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the grand chamber, the council stood as one, but not in pride. In fear, guards lined the walls. Generals crowded the steps. Screens showed the same image from 1,000 angles. A human warship hovering at knife distance from the most protected planet in the galaxy. No one spoke first. The silence felt alive. Then the ship spoke. This world ordered our end. This chamber signed it. Hear us. The voice was human, calm, clear, carried by every wire, every satellite, every implant. Children in sleep pods heard it. Pilots in cockpits heard it. Deep under polar ice heard it. There was no place it did not reach. A young delegate dropped her cup. It shattered against the stone, and the sound made every head turn like a gunshot. Open a channel, the speaker croaked. You will negotiate. There was no reply. Not at first. Only that slow blue heartbeat through the hull of the ship. In the sky, in the steady hum of shields, straining not to fail, the old general lifted his chin. If they meant to kill us, he said, we would already be ash. Then what do they want? Someone whispered. The answer came. Memory. In truth, plot. The judgment above the capital across orbit. Captains gripped their armrests. Targeting reticles tried to lock and slid away as if the ship were made of smoke. One brave commander, a Zell with steel-feathered frills, armed a lance cannon. Anyway, do not fire, her first officer begged. She hesitated. On her screen, the ship's outline steadied, not hiding, not darting. Waiting in the chamber below, the speaker forced strength into his voice. Human vessel. You stand over our capital in violation of you voted. The voice cut. In, not loud, but perfectly placed. By 112 hands, you declared Earth a contagion. By 62, you funded the fleets that burned our colonies. By unanimous consent, you sealed our files and called us myths. The ceiling lights dimmed. Holograms unfolded above the circle records no one had permission to show. Stamped seals, secret orders, signatures, pictures of human worlds before they fell, seas like hammered glass. Cities under auroras, children in gravity gardens, fleets. Leaving orbit with their lights low, gasps broke across the chamber. How the speaker started and then stopped. He knew there was no answer that would help. Lyratel stood at the railing, hands tight on the stone. Her 4 silver eyes. Stung, she had never been to Earth. She did not know if she believed the old stories. But the faces in the holograms were not legends, were people. You told yourselves we were finished, the voice went on. You taught your young to laugh at our name. You thought silence was proof. So the images changed. Burning habitats. Evacuation craft shot from the sky. A line of human ships holding a gap in an asteroid belt while transports ran hulls red. Guns white, crews shouting through smoke. On one scarred prow a name gleamed through ash. Data rebbed. The old general's breath hitched. He had seen that ship and lived. He wished he had not. The voice lowered, somehow nearer. We carried our dead into the dark. We carried our anger. Learned patience. We learned to listen to your laughter. A pause. We are done listening. In orbit, the Zell commander squeezed her trigger. A thread of light leapt from her lance straight, perfect, brave. It never touched the target. Space folded like cloth pinched between fingers. The beam bent, coiled and hung as a bright ring around. The Erebus humming like a trapped note. On a second pulse from the hull, the ring snapped split into 1,000 needles and drifted. Away as harmless sparks. The commander let her hands fall from the controls. We cannot fight this, she whispered. Across the planet. Shield technicians stared as their graphs shifted on their own. Cycle relays retimed, thermal loads bled off without ever crossing into red. Something was managing there. Safety better than they could? In the chamber, the speaker tried again. If there is to be redress, we can form a commission. We can no commissions, said the voice. Only a line. Every screen showed it, a faint arc traced. Across the sky above the capital, thin as breath, bright as frost. It curved from horizon to horizon, like a blade laid across the world. Everything above this line is war, the voice said. Everything below it is not. On cue, defense satellites drifted upward, gently, as if lifted by a tide. Cannons rotated away. Patrol craft eased past the arc and found their engines dead, then alive again once they cleared the mark. No alarms screamed, no circuits burned. Ship in the sky had made a boundary, and the boundary obeyed. Panic became awe became dread. The old general bowed his head. "They are sparing us," he said, "so we will remember being spared." A feathered matriarch wept without tears. "Why one ship?" she asked. "No one and everyone. Why send only one?" Loretto found her voice. It was small, but steady. "To show restraint, we show what one can do, so we imagine the rest." The speaker's mask of composure cracked. He faced the high cameras, the eyes of the worlds beyond. Dan spoke to the sky. "What do you demand?" For the first time, the voice warmed by a fraction barely enough to notice. "Names," it said. "The names of those who signed the fire, the coordinates of the camps you deny, the keys to the locked files you pretend never existed. We will take them from your vaults if you do not give them. Give them, and your cities sleep." The chamber looked to the clerks, to the archivists, to the ones who lived in the shadows of power. They stared back with gray faces and understood that history had teeth. "We will compile them," the speaker said. "It will take one cycle," the voice replied. "On your clocks, not ours." The blue veins brightened. Cross orbit, wreckage from a dozen quiet wars woke and moved. Broken hulks turned, ranged, aligned until the junk formed letters big enough to read with naked eyes from the Capitol. Terraces, remember, citizens came out onto balconies. Children pointed. Old veterans sat down hard on the steps and held their faces. In mountain monasteries, bells rang without hands. Lyratel looked up through the open dome at the word written by ghosts, and the word looked back. "Will you leave?" Nachu asked. Not into a mic, not to be recorded, just because she needed to know if sleep would ever come again to any world. For a moment, there was no answer. Then the Erebus spoke one last time. "We will leave your sky. We will not leave your maps." The line above the world faded. Power grids returned to normal. Defense towers settled. Relays fell back into their old rhythms, as if waking from a dream they would try to forget. The ship turned. It did not flare. It did not roar. It simply dimmed, folding night around itself until stars shone through it like holes in cloth. The great shape slid toward the outer dark, slow as a moonset, sure as a verdict. The speaker exhaled. So did millions. In orbit, the Zell commander whispered to her crew, "Stand down." And no one argued. In the chamber, voices rose, agon orders, counter orders, fevered plans. Open the vaults. Call allies, accuse neighbors, pledge truth, swear lies. The old habits of empires returned in a rush, loud and bright and fragile. Only Lyratel stayed quiet. She watched the ships glow thin into a needle, and then into a single blue blink at the system's edge. The old general stood beside her. "You were right," he said. "One was enough." She nodded. For today, on the outer screen, a new data line appeared. Faint tremor at the edge of the long-range net. Then a second. Then three. Not bright. Not close. Just there. Like footfalls far down a corridor you suddenly realize is not empty. Technicians leaned in. Analysts sharpened their eyes. The chamber's noise softened as the numbers climbed. Multiple distortions, someone whispered, distant, coordinated. "How many?" the speaker asked. The answer came back, thin with static, small enough to be doubted by anyone who needed to doubt, clear enough to cut anyone who did not. "Unknown," said the voice from the pit. But more than one. Night over the council world was beautiful again. The rings glowed, the seas gleamed. Ships moved in patient arcs. Nothing exploded, nothing burned. And yet, across 1,000 worlds, people did not look away from their sky, because the last message from the human ship was still written up there in orbit. Letter by letter, spelled in wreckage and light. Remember the galaxy would? It would remember the day laughter ended and a single human warship drew a line across the stars, And as the far-edge distortions ticked once more like a slow, deep heartbeat, an older fear settled into every capital, every palace, every bunker and barracks. Next time, it will not come alone.